Welcome, everyone. My name is Erik Cave. I'm the Director of Next Gen Ministries for the Pacific Northwest Conference. And I've got my friend Asher Ernst here. He is the lead pastor of City Covenant in Spokane, Washington. And City Covenant recently changed their name from Communitas. So Asher, welcome. Tell us a little about yourself and what led to forming your church 6 years ago and that name of Communitas.
Yeah. Thanks, Erik. It's really cool to be with everybody. So for us, a big part of it was when we started 6 years ago, we planted and immediately connected with the covenant as we were in the planting process. Before that, what's interesting is in our stories, we were actually, a lot of us who were part of this plant team were actually part of a church within a church, in a Presbyterian church that's only about a mile away from where we meet now. And we were at the evening service there. And so when we planted, the old evening service that we were part of was actually called Communitas. And so I think honestly, we didn't want to change a lot at the time when we planted, just because we wanted everyone to feel as included and coming along with it as they could. Communitas, though, was originally, the name, comes from this Latin idea of community with a purpose. And so I think at the time, the idea was really cool. But to be honest, we felt like there were a couple stumbling blocks with it. One is Spokane is not a super educated city. Only about 25% of people have bachelor's degrees and 10% of people have advanced degrees. But by having a Latin name, we just felt like that made it sound as though you needed to somehow like understand Latin to really feel like you could easily be included in the church. And so we just felt like, honestly, it sounds to Spokane, it feels a little like elitist, for lack of a better word. But then, so what also got us changing it was honestly the number of times that you would invite your friends to our church and they would say something along the lines of, "Oh, I'd love to come visit your church." And they'd say, "What's it called?" And we'd say Communitas. And they'd say, "Communa what?" And honestly, there were just too many times like that. And it was just too much of a stumbling block. And so we wanted to name it something that just frankly got out of the way and was probably more neutral. And that's how we landed at a geographically based name, because we're right next to downtown. We're only about 5 blocks from the center of downtown. And we're just in a really great location and really have a heart for the city. And so that's, kind of the beginnings of what got us thinking about changing the name and using something geographic instead.
Yeah, that's good. So what was the process like for you and your church leaders to change the name, and what's it like now with the new name?
Well, it's kind of funny. So we had a few times that we thought about changing the name. We actually tried right before COVID, and then COVID happened, and it felt like, just like so many other churches and pastors, we felt like we were just honestly trying to hang on, make it for a while there. And so there was just no energy any longer, behind, looking and saying, okay, of all the things we should work on right now, changing the name.
Yeah.
But then what happened was we actually, as a lot of people know, we actually were just given this incredible gift where the church building that we had been renting for 5 years, they actually decided they wanted to sell it to us. And so they had been the owners and we had been the tenants, and it just switched to where they wanted to keep rolling. They're a aging Lutheran congregation that has been in decline for literally like 3, almost 4 decades. And they said, what if we could keep meeting here? Their church is called Central Lutheran. And they said, what if Central Lutheran could keep meeting here and we'll rent it back from you? And so I think actually in consultation, even just with a few covenant leaders, they said, hey, buying a building is like your last best time to look at changing the name. And so that's really what got us to do it. Like kind of we understood the why, like why should we change it? But the second question is why now? And so the question of why now became pretty easy, because we looked and said, well, we want to be really being able to kind of get a fresh start in a way. And we felt like buying the building was a good time to do it.
Yeah, that worked out perfectly. So tell us, like, what are you excited about in ministry right now?
Well, like I mentioned, we're really close to downtown, and Spokane's a pretty spread out city, but has a really great, vibrant downtown core and some really fantastic walkable neighborhoods near downtown. And so we're really excited to do like city-based urban ministry. When we think about it, just as we even think about like our philosophy of ministry and what God is calling us to, a big part of our name, because it is geographically oriented, because we're a geographically oriented church. We look I think for me in particular, and for a lot of us at our church, we think about like passages like Jeremiah 29. And right when in Jeremiah 29, you have these folks who've been exiled to Babylon. And it really felt to Jews who had been exiled to Babylon as though God almost had forgotten about them, and so
Mm.
there was this impulse from a lot of them to say, let's just pull back, let's live at the edge of the city, let's not engage. And I bet, remember the false prophets in Jeremiah 29 were promising people that they would go home and back to Jerusalem soon. And then in comes Jeremiah, right, speaking, and God speaking through him and says, no, this wasn't an accident, and I have not forgotten you. But remember, then we get to the sweet like t-shirt verse of Jeremiah 29:11 of behold, I've got good plans for you, plans to
Yeah,
prosper,
yeah.
not to harm you. I think what people forget about that is that was not written in isolation. That part exists because God is telling them, I want you to plant gardens, put down roots, get your kids married there, build a future there. You're going to be there for 70 years.
Mm.
Be a part of the city, be in the city, but not of the city. And so for us as City Covenant, that's really a big part of our philosophy is we want to be a faithful presence in the middle of downtown Spokane and be in the city and, be a blessing to the people that we're around. But knowing at the end of the day, we're foreigners, right? That we're always going to be a different people, but we are people who exist because of God's grace to be a blessing to our neighbors.
Wow, that gets me excited as well. So that's great. So you and your church are going to be hosting at least part of the annual meeting coming up this April. So what would you say to people that are thinking about coming out to Spokane for the annual meeting?
This is going to be a great time to come. I love Spokane. So I grew up somewhat near here, went to college in Seattle, loved UW, loved my time in Seattle. But I will tell you, spring in Spokane is nicer. So by the time end of April comes, the waterfalls here are giant in the middle of downtown, and they're beautiful. There's this huge trail system next to downtown and through this huge series of parks that people can take. Everything's blooming by the end of April. And it's just a really, really fun time to be in Spokane. It's only about 4 hours from the Puget Sound. And so people actually get over here pretty quick. And it is just gonna be, I think, a lot of fun. In addition to that, I think we're gonna have killer times of worship together and great breakout sessions and great trainings. So I'm really looking forward for the group of Covenant churches in Spokane to be able to host everybody. And I really hope everyone makes it out for this.
Yeah, I do too. Look forward to seeing you there. I hope a lot of people will come out. So Ashley, thanks a lot for sharing your story today about your name change and what's going on at your church and for the invitation out to Spokane.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eric.